Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a chilly December 4th here in suburban Chicago. I'm recording one of the last episodes of Season 2 of Pick Up and Deliver, so I thought it would make sense to do another question and answer episode. I'm also recording it at a time when I have a little bit more open schedule, so I'm able to answer the questions that are posed to me all in one go. So this episode might be slightly longer than your usual 12 to 15 minutes, but that's okay. You can listen in two parts if it's too long for you. So about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I posted a note on the Pick Up and Deliver Guild, which is Guild 3269 over on BoardgameGeek, and I asked people to submit questions they had for this particular episode. We had 3 users who submitted. Thank you to Chris, and Doug for your helpful suggestions. I'm happy to engage with those. First, some questions from Chris Graves, username Voodoo Chill. Chris first asks how I got into board gaming and how my tastes have changed over the years. Well, the short answer is I've been a gamer my whole life. I mean, I've always liked board games. It was always something I did. We always had board games around the house, but I mean, often it was sort of minor board games, things that are just regular people had. I'm going to offer I guess I'll offer 4 moments of gaming. The fourth one, which brought me into the hobby in its current mode. So first moment of gaming, I remember when I was a kid, there was one year, I was maybe 10, we went to a neighborhood garage sale, and it was a whole neighborhood, and we were allowed to, I think my mom gave me $5 or $10 or something to buy things. And I ended up buying like 15 board games from people for anywhere from $1 to $0.25. So I got a whole bunch of board games that way. And I remember a lot of them were weird games we'd never heard of. And like Anti-Monopoly was one of the games that I got. And I remember that being pretty cool and weird. So lots of little stuff like that. Really interesting. When I was maybe a senior in high school, I started playing Warhammer with a friend of mine who was the manager at a movie theater, and that ate up a lot of my money most of the way through college. Instead of drinking, I played Warhammer instead, and it was, I'd say, a fair trade. I had a lot of fun with that. I've been selling off those Warhammer miniatures over the last couple of years, so I only have a few left, and they're going to go soon, and then I will be completely divested of my Warhammer collection. Oh well. The next moment was early in my marriage, maybe my second birthday after we got married. Might even been my first one. My wife spent a bunch of time on the internet researching and finding games for us to play, and she bought me a bunch of games. And a lot of them were unusual or weird or things I'd never heard of. But 3 of the games that she got me Munchkin, she got me Shay Geek, and she got me a game called Bosworth, which is like a card game that you play on a board, where your cards are the pieces, and the pieces move like chess pieces. All 3 of those were interesting and weird games, and it was really good to have them. And a nice answer to Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, which I had just stopped playing at the time. I guess a collectible card game was something I played a lot too. Finally, the moment I think that got me back into the hobby as it exists now is 2009. I had a student in my zombie class did her presentation about a zombie text on the board game Last Night on Earth, and I thought it sounded really cool, and I went and bought a copy, and that got me back onto BoardgameGeek, and I slowly over the next 2 years kind of fell back into the hobby, and then it's been accelerating ever since. So yeah, it was really cool, lots of fun to get back into the hobby, but that's the way. You know, I think over time, just as I've been exposed to more deep games, my tastes have gotten deeper and more esoteric for the average non-gamer. I still am an omni gamer. I can still enjoy almost anything you put on the table in front of me. But I'm not going to be drawn as much to the sort of classic Ameritrash games like Risk as I would have been when I was younger. But I certainly have room in my life for games where you solve issues by throwing dice. Something like A Touch of Evil is still a game I really enjoy, and I look forward to playing it whenever we get a chance. The same with Last Night on Earth. So I guess that's how my tastes have changed. Can you sustain your current level of consumption, or will it even out? Is that urge for new experiences part of the overall joy of your hobby? The second part is absolutely yes. I really love playing new games. Almost always, I'll choose a new game over a game I know already. Not always, but often. I really like learning new games and playing new games. In terms of the overall consumption, I definitely am slowing down. I haven't acquired nearly as many games this year as I did in previous years, and I suspect next year will be even fewer. As just my shelves are full, my mental space is full, and my pocketbook is empty for game budget. So I think that I certainly will be culling my collection even more aggressively next year. I see myself buying fewer games. Like, I think the fever for new games has worn off a little bit. Gen Con and Essen did not bring nearly so much salivating for me this year as they have in previous years. And I think that the games they're bringing out are all still very good. I don't think it's like suddenly Gen Con is not as good or Essen is not as good this year. If anything, it's probably reasonable to argue they're better. I've got enough games now that the taste for new games is much more limited or restricted. So I still enjoy playing new games, but I suspect letting other people buy them is a big part of where I am in the hobby now. Thanks, Chris Graves, for those questions. Chris Hickman, username Christopher Hickman, I think, asked a couple of fairly robust questions that could be episodes in themselves. And if I weren't running up against the end of the season, I probably would make them separate episodes, but I don't have time. So, very fast. Chris first asked, what's my Christmas wish list? You know, I think, like a lot of hobby gamers, I have so many games, and I am so particular about which games I want to buy that I don't really expect people to get me games for Christmas because they wouldn't know what to get. But I do put together a list, and sometimes I'll put a game or two on there. So, looking at my current top want list and sort of filtering it a little bit, here would be my Christmas wish list for games. Twilight Imperium 4th Edition, Glass Road, Jaws, and then expansions for Through the Ages, Roll for the Galaxy, and Innovation. Also Bunny Kingdom, the expansion for Bunny Kingdom. That would be a nice selection of possible games that I would enjoy getting. There are, of course, dozens more games that I would like. If I found myself at a game store with a big gift certificate and a limited amount of time to think about it, I certainly could find games I'd want to buy. But those are the ones that are jumping out at me right now. Chris also asked some recommended games for a gift exchange among where there's non-gamers are going to be present. So you want to think about games that non-gamers can figure out how to play and would have fun with, which, you know, leads me to a lot of shelf-staples. One that I am pretty sure is a good fit based on reviews, but I've not had a chance to try myself yet, is Just One. That seems to be universally loved. Love Letter, I always think is great. Codenames is a reliable one. And then two that I think are probably less commonly recommended now. The Chameleon is a social deduction game I've gotten to play a few times. It's really tight, really easy to teach, not too expensive, plays a huge number of people. You can play 8 or 10 pretty easily. I think 8 is maybe the maximum, but it's really fun with that many. Now, the Chameleon is sort of like Spyfall in that it's a game where there's a grid of choices on the table, and everybody knows the topic except one player, or everybody knows which of the answers on the grid is the right answer. So it might be a grid full of U.S. presidents, and it tells us that Teddy Roosevelt is the president we're talking about. So everyone has to give a one-word clue that tries to indicate to the table that they know we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt, but without so much in it that the chameleon can figure out we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt, because their goal is to hide and not get figured out that they don't know which one they're talking about. It's really fun. And then finally, over Thanksgiving, I got to play Perudo, which is more commonly known as Liar's Dice. Boy, it was really fun, easy to teach, simple to play. All you need is 5 dice per player, so you could use a Yahtzee set or some Yahtzee sets. You could get them at Goodwill if you're looking to go inexpensive. Or I noticed that the discount store Tuesday morning is selling Liar's Dice. I'm actually going to pick up a couple copies as gifts for the year, because it's like $6 and you get a bunch of stuff and it's a really fun game. So I'm going to say Liar's Dice as one more recommended for gift exchange, because it's inexpensive and fun. Chris asked for a board game connoisseur or episode on family holiday get-together games. That isn't really what I've done so far, but I did do one about Thanksgiving, which just came out on the 1st, so I will point you toward that, and maybe for a future episode do a family holiday get-together one that maybe fits a more general holiday rather than Thanksgiving particularly. And finally, Chris Hickman asked me for games that are best played fireside, which I think he means best games to play fireside rather than games that are best played fireside. I can't think of many that work best by the fire and not somewhere else. But, thinking about games that work, so the qualities of playing a game by fireside, I presume usually this is going to be an intimate affair. It could be either with a romantic partner or a small family group in like a cabin where you're playing by the fire in relatively low light. So you want a game that's not too hard to play, which is why a lot of classic games survive that way. I would say the Jigamic table presence games like Quarto or Quarador, Quarto particularly, would be excellent to play by the fire because it's big chunky pieces, it's easy to learn, it's fun to play over multiple rounds. That's a really good one. If you have decent light, a 2-player drafting game like Tides of Madness is really good, but you have to be able to read the cards. So I would not say that one's ideal. I think really 2-player abstracts are probably the best. So Hive maybe, or Onitama would be great by the fire, something where you're intimate, you're sitting close to one another. And then something like Jaipur, which is a 2-player trading game, and the cards are very distinct so you can see them in low light. That would be a good one as well. I guess, and finally, if you know how to play it, cribbage is an excellent kind of fireside game because it's easy, it's fun to sort of chat and play at the same time. It's not too hard once you understand it. It's a kind of a bother to learn, but it's really fun. Plus, it's got, again, that sort of presence of the pegboard. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be particularly a good fireside game. But yeah, stuff with big, chunky components. Jenga would be fun. So that's what I would say games best played by the fire. So then the last question that I had here was from Douglas Klipfel. Douglas asked, I would enjoy a top 10 from you. Top 10 games of 2019 or all time. I thought about doing a top 10 of 2019, but I don't think I've played enough 2019 games. I may have played 10 of them, but if I have, it's just 10. So it's hard for me to do much beyond here's the 10 that I played from 2019. But I wouldn't even be surprised to learn that most of the games I played this year are not from 2019. As much as I acquire a lot of new games, I'm not nearly as cult of the new as I used to be last year or 2 years ago. Not quite as much anyway. I really like playing new games that are new to me, but getting the brand new thing isn't as much. I guess, 2017, 2018, I got burned by a few brand new games that didn't turn out to be that great, and I spent a lot of money on them because they were brand new. Between that and my desire to cull my collection and my desire to be a bit more thrifty, I've slowed down acquiring new games. And as a result, it would be very hard for me to do a top 10 games of 2019. So a top 10 in general. Douglas, you may not have known this, but early in the run of the episode of the show, around episode 50, I did a top 50 games of all time for myself. It's a 2-part episode and tells people the kinds of games I like. Well, I've been reflecting on it, and I haven't done a top 50 since 2017. And at that point, I hadn't done one since 2015. So it seemed like it was time to do it again. And seeing as the end of the season was coming up, this seemed like the time. So, in case you hadn't guessed that it was coming, episode 200 of Pick Up and Deliver, the last episode of the season, will be a new top 50 episode. That means it's going to be really long. It's probably going to be an hour, maybe an hour and a half, as I talk about the top 50 games. And it might be a little repetitive if you listened to my top 50 in 2017. I'm sure I'm going to say some of the same things about some of those games. But I will tell you now, there's an awful lot of new games on that list. And some of the old favorites have moved dramatically. So it will be exciting to reveal to you, and look forward to doing that in our next episode. In the meantime, thank you to everybody who asked questions, and I hope that I answered them adequately. And that's just about it for me. I would love to hear your answers to some of these questions. Pop over to BoardgameGeek Guild 3269 and let me know what you have been reading or thinking about. What kinds of games you would play in a family get-together, or by a fireside, or bring to a gift exchange, or how you got into the hobby. All these questions and answers that I've engaged with, I would love to hear your answers as well. That's it for me today. Thanks for joining me on my walk. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.